Hello everybody, Brian from the channel Brian here, hoping you're doing decent or better. And I thought I'd come on with a bit of a different video this week and discuss how I might update my best of the year lists and worst of the year lists from the past couple years that I've been on YouTube. Because when I make my best and worst of the year list videos, like the ones I just put out for 2021, I always try to add the little caveat that it is a list representative of the date when they come out. Because over time, that list is probably not going to stay the same. My thoughts are probably going to change a little. I'm going to see more movies that maybe would have been on those lists had I seen them at the time. And yeah, I think it might be a good idea to every so often update my lists a little like this. I can confidently say that were I to remake those videos today, the orders and movies on them would change. But we're gonna go in order and start with my best of 2019 list. I haven't seen a ton of movies from this year since I've made my list. The original top 10 will be what you see on the screen here. And I can say pretty conclusive, I have it in front of me so I can see it too. And very conclusively, the top four and the order they're in has not changed. It's still The Lighthouse, Midsummer, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. And to be fair, yeah, you'd have to be something really special to change that order. I guess the major addition to this list would be just beneath those would be Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which was a movie that at the time I really wanted to see before I made the list because I was pretty certain based on word of mouth that I would like it and it would probably be pretty high up, and that's very clearly the case now. For its supreme directing, cinematography, use of color, and especially music. All of the music in this is diegetic and always is at like a very heightened sense of poignancy in whatever scene it happens to show up in. Especially in the ending, which I, of course, will not spoil, but it's really something special if you can get the chance to take it out. Highly recommend it. Although if you're like a film buff, chances are you probably already have. Looking towards the bottom of my list, John Wick 3, which probably would have been my number 11 that year, I decided to move up, and Climax, which I moved above Marriage Story, though Marriage Story was still pretty great. Looking at this list now, it's kind of like, yeah, 2019, kind of full of bangers. This year is a perfect demonstration of how high scoring I typically am and like to be. Like every movie on this list is an 8 or higher. And 2021 and 2020 are like really low scoring in comparison. I guess other movies that I've seen since then that wouldn't make the list, I really enjoyed Shazam, but I wouldn't put it on my like best of the year list or anything. Although it would probably be close to being on there. Yeah, like an honorable mention, maybe. As for worst, I mean, it's mostly order that I adjusted here. I mean, obviously, Hidden Colors 5 got added because, like, holy shit, dude. But, I mean, I moved Dumbo. I moved Dumbo up a little, and I finally realized Rise of Skywalker is just truly one of the most, like, frustrating movies I've ever seen. Like, it's seriously, like, number 2 now. It's seriously like number 2. The only other thing I added, I guess, would be Polar, which is a gross, juvenile, insipid, unengaging, not at all fun to watch John Wick ripoff, starring Mads Mikkelsen. I think one thing that a lot of these John Wick ripoffs aren't missing, and this was also true of that movie Nobody that came out last year, is that one of the reasons John Wick and those subsequent films work as well as they do is that Keanu Reeves can actually do his own stunts and move like you would expect a character with John Wick's history can. The action in Polar is not very good, and that's probably because I don't think that Mads Mikkelsen is, as cool as he is, as proficient a martial artist as Keanu Reeves. And it results in a lot of action that just feels much more phony. On top of all of its, like, pre-teen edgy shit. But that's really all I have to add to my worst of that year. I'm really glad that I found at least two, because Terminator Dark Fate and Cats that were on there originally, like Cats was on there just because I needed a 10th. I actually kind of really enjoyed how awful that was, and I don't like to put movies on worst of the year list if I genuinely enjoyed them. But Terminator Dark Fate, really just a filler for that year. Like, I think I even say in the video that if I had seen more worse movies, it probably wouldn't be on there at all. However, the real meat of this discussion I wanted to be about 2020 because, as you may recall, not a ton of movies coming out just in general. So few, in fact, I only did a top 5 best and worst list combo. Because I did not feel comfortable putting 10 movies on a list where I would have to be like, you really need to see this, or this was so personally objectionable. That's kind of changed for me, as genuinely I think I can do that now. I think just by the nature of what happened that year, in the long run, lists surrounding 2020 aren't going to change very much because of the lack of movies to discover from now on. There's always going to be a smaller pool of movies to judge. However, my top 5 best you can see here, and we're going to expand that to a 10. Feels Good Man and Another Round, those positions have not changed. Those are still very clearly my top 2. I had not seen most of the Best Picture noms from the year at the time of making my list. I reviewed most of them afterwards. And the top pick for me would be Minari. It would probably be about here. Other than that, the only other one I think would go on the list is Nomadland. That movie was kind of divisive, but I actually really enjoyed the same structural, slow-paced, kind of emotional aspects maybe other people could not get into. It's, like everything, it's really just a matter of taste. The order of movies that were already on my list I would change a little. The remaining 3 I would kind of flip them. I would put The Assistant highest, Sound of Metal, and then Soul. Yeah, The Assistant is just the one that stood out in my head the most as more time passes. It's very realistic in its portrayal of, like, workplace discrimination, office culture, particularly in the film industry, even though it is much more realistic in that most of the office part is like taking place in New York with people shuffling papers around. It's a very bold choice to not show as much as The Assistant did not show, but tactfully include little snarky references to it through like comments from Kitty Green. No, not Kitty Green. What's her name? Julia Garner. I wanted to get that right. Julia Garner. Yeah, snarky comments coming from like her superiors or her supervisors, sort of informing what's going on behind the scenes instead of having some like overblown, preachy, snarky, Oscar baity dramatic reveal of abuse that just kind of lessens the reality and impact of those things. Soul, I still think, is a pretty good Pixar movie, and I really like the character design, a lot of it. However, like, the more it marinates in my head, the more its themes just kind of seem surface level and really what the rest of the film is kind of built around compared to a lot of older Pixar movies where that would be kind of flipped, making sure that the story is still engaging with the message still functional. But I mean, I think that message is still entirely valid, and it's got that really just killer Trent Reznor, like, jazzy soul score. Quite squarely at the bottom of the list, ranks 10 and 9 would be, they're pretty much interchangeable, actually, for me. I'm thinking of Ending Things and Tenet, because they're basically, in pop culture, to me, they represent the same thing. They are two movies that are caricatures of their directors, Chris Nolan and Charlie Kaufman, respectively. And these are two directors who people see as, like, intricate geniuses who are very detail-oriented but appeal to a very specific sensibility, and they have just pressed down so hard with these films about what appeals to their fans to the point where they basically alienated everybody else. Only now the fans of these directors do not understand why people are annoyed by these films. I am just talking about the audience reception when I say that it alienated people. For me, I think that when you get down to it, both of these films are very above average. I did appreciate just the audacity of both films, like straining the limits of auteur theory, and they both were actually very enjoyable for me as well, but more interesting to talk about because of that audience alienation. They're very interesting pieces of pop culture to talk about. Even though I would rewatch both of them, I would probably be just as confused watching them a second time as I was the first. But the final edition, and probably I think the most underrated movie of the year from last year, that's The Empty Man. It's really messy, but it's incredibly ambitious and great in ways that I wish more movies were. This movie was kind of murdered by the studio because it was a 20th Century Fox movie that was set to be released like very shortly after Disney acquired them. And if you watch this movie, it's so strange, and so they didn't really know what to do or how to market it, so they didn't. The way the story will unfold, it'll almost episodically switch to a different tone, a style of cinematography, a set design, a set of plot points, becoming almost like a different movie every act. But it's done in a way that feels like the director is actively, consciously using that to build to something. Like it's not something that is only there to disorient you or just throw random bullshit as misdirection. There's like a noticeable ramp up every time it happens, growing into this urban legend, true crime documentary feel, like a feature-length Nexpo video. It could feel jumbled to some, and I bet if you comb over the plot, there might be a few little plot holes or conveniences that'd piss people off. Especially when you get to the twist, like the final twist, and that's revealed to you. I can say that The Empty Man does not stick the landing. However, something that does the things this does, and the places it goes to, and just how well executed the journey is to get to that twist, it's still something to be admired and respected. Just in how much it deviates from what an audience might be expecting. It like speaks so well to like the experience that a director in control of their properties can give you. It's great. As for worst, literally the only reason I did not make a top 10 worst is because I needed like one more movie and I wanted to be consistent. I thought it'd be too negative if I focused on like 10 worst movies and only 5 best. That would seem kind of skewed in my opinion. But in terms of any order changes, just I changed my mind. Cuties is worse than New Mutants. Artemis Fowl would be around where Mulan and Guns Akimbo are. But the movie that I really needed to solidify making a top 10 worst is I hadn't seen Wonder Woman 1984, a movie that has no vision, no successful, compelling displays of heroism, when the crucial arc of your intensely feminist-aiming blockbuster is Diana being just so bummed that she can't find a man. I mean, what is the thought process here? For all of its extremely lengthy runtime, it just doesn't seem to have anything a person who goes to see a Wonder Woman sequel with the expectations set from the last movie, it doesn't seem like it has anything that a person with those expectations would want to see. It's funny, I watched this movie with my dad, and I don't think I've ever seen him more upset at a movie before, so that was funny. But I mean, Vivarium and Hillbilly Elegy are easy to stick towards like the bottom of my list. And for like a 10th, you could pick like any generic cheapo direct-to-streaming movie that came out that year. My first thought, best thought, The Old Guard. And hate to end the video on like a really anticlimactic note saying The Old Guard is what I'd add. But I mean, But yeah, I think that's it. I didn't want this video to be too long where I over-explain like every placement and every order change, things on my list. Just kind of examine how maybe my thoughts have changed, just as an exercise for myself, and maybe if you're interested. We'll see. It's been a few weeks since I reviewed just a movie on its own, not since Licorice Pizza, but I'll try and get those back up and running, hopefully next week, if not the week after. I have a project or two that I want to try out, and we'll just see timing based how those things pan out. but normal movie reviews are coming back soon. It's just list season. Maybe I'll do an Oscar video if I can actually see every Best Picture winner, which I kind of need to. So anyway, enough of this minor update. If you like not only words, but the way I arrange and then say them, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to me, Brian from the channel Brian. Thank you, and goodbye.